Administration is facing intense heat over its policies related to the Israel-Hamas conflict, with pro-Palestinian protests sweeping across America's top universities and authorities unable to curb their efforts. Pro-Palestine protests are underway in major U.S. universities, including Columbia, New York University, Yale, MIT University of California, and many more. Students are staging sit-in protests, occupying buildings, and holding rallies. At Columbia University, students were given a deadline to clear their encampments. The deadline was first set for midnight, but the students maintained their camps. They were then allowed to stay until 8 a.m., and even as the students prepared for a confrontation with the police, the deadline was again extended for another 48 hours.
With the students inside, with the students across the country, with the students across the country, with the people of conscience around the world, with the people of conscience around the world, with our sisters and brothers in Gaza, and with our sisters and brothers in Gaza, with our sisters and brothers of oppressed people across the world, with our sisters and brothers of oppressed people across the world, and we're not backing down, and we're not backing down.
Authorities are struggling to contain the protests that are ongoing for days. On Monday, at least 133 protesters were arrested from the NYU campus for defying university warnings. Over 100 protesters were also arrested at Columbia University last week, while dozens of others were detained on other campuses. Many universities have canceled in-person classes amidst the turmoil. The deepening divisions on campuses are triggered and have caused heated exchanges and insults between rival supporters of Palestine and Israel. And ahead of the elections here in the United States, the rising dissatisfaction with U.S. response to the war has become a big challenge for the Biden administration. Amidst this, Israel's Diaspora Affairs Minister says that he will vote for former President Donald Trump in the upcoming U.S. presidential election if he could. His remarks come just hours after the U.S. Senate, under President Joe Biden, approved billions in military aid to Israel. All right, we are being joined by Adel Nazarian, political commentator from Washington, D.C., to talk about all of this. Adel, great to see you. Welcome back to WION. Wow, what a week it's been on these campuses, and just watching them, you wonder how these Jewish students are feeling and whether or not authorities at these universities are able to keep these Jewish students safe, considering the fact that we are hearing chants from these students and protesters, chants like, "We are Hamas."
Suzanne, great to be on with you again. I never thought I'd live to see the day that this would happen in my lifetime after everything that, we've seen throughout history. I got to tell you, I was covering the BDS protests from anti-Israel students at UCLA, Berkeley, other publicly funded university, Southern California campuses, and Northern California back in 2014. And tried sounding the alarm back then, and matters have only gotten worse. I think it's really an abomination that the campuses cannot themselves even protect their own students, that they are calling for Jewish students to, well, a rabbi called from Columbia University for Jewish students to get home as soon as they could. And I have to say this, anti-Semitism is really the canary in the coal mine for a democracy that is in dire straits, in dire trouble. And this isn't protesting, this is harassment. And it's really sad that if you wear a kippah, if you wear a Jewish star, if you have a mezuzah on the door of the frame of your door of your campus, dorm, you are a target. And I don't know that the university honestly is doing enough to really combat against it. I think calling for students to go home, frankly, I get it. You want to protect your students' well-being and safety, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to question, is it really a victory by going home, or is it more of an obligation to confront these hateful people and to put an end to the bigotry and to put an end to the violence and hatred from further exasperating and blowing into, I don't even want to bring it up, but a scenario where we saw, decades ago. That's what we have to be asking.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking to see. Adele, as you mentioned, you've covered protests like these. I've covered many demonstrations like these and others. Some of them may be organic to get a few students out, but these seem extremely well planned. Is it time for us to follow the money and see who is really supporting these demonstrators, these organizers, and to what extent?
I'm so glad that you're bringing this up, Suzanne. There's such a plethora of information and a trail from years ago. Follow the BDS money trail. There have been conferences on this. There are reports in media that is not necessarily mainstream, frankly, that has it well documented. I'll just give you one example. It's actually two-pronged. One example is, I'll just tell you, the Open Society Foundation. Everyone's heard of it. It's George Soros's foundation. He has the Open Society Foundation has distributed over 17 million, I believe. No, sorry, $13 million through the Tide Center, which is a deep-pocketed lefty advocacy group that supports several nonprofits who've justified Hamas's bloody attacks against Israel. And they are based out of Illinois. And the beneficiaries of one of the beneficiaries, for example, of this, the Tides Center, which is funded by the Open Society Foundation, is the Adela Justice Project, which actually posted on Instagram a picture of a bulldozer tearing apart Israel's border fence, just to give you an example. So there is definitely big money behind this, and it's left-wing big money. I have to also say, though, this is also being unfortunately taxpayer funded. You have, as we both mentioned, we covered this, publicly funded universities that are the focal points and epicenters of indoctrination, mass indoctrination, and they are being funded by taxpayer dollars to teach students to hate one side and to demonize one side through propaganda. And it's really just a very, very dangerous concoction. So it is time to go back into, I will say it, read publications. I think the Wall Street Journal even put out an article I think it was yesterday, asking who's behind the Israel protests. They suggested it was Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis that are grooming activists in the US and across the West. There may be some truth to that as well, but I really think the crux of it, frankly, is coming from within our own borders, from the university, the upper echelons of the far left think, if I may say, of the university campuses, and groups that are funded by billionaires who are ideologically opposed to a certain, let's say, purview that doesn't align with theirs. There's quite a few things, but following money trail is definitely the way to go about it.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. Adele, thank you so much for that thorough analysis, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Thank you. Same here.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.